Hello, folks. Very late or early for me, I guess. Let's do a little talk. Let's do a little conversation. Let's do a little monologue. Not pre-planned, by the way. Um, we can touch up, a few subjects here. Um, Very interesting, curious times. As always, as per tradition, um, just testing if we sound okay. Um, Give me an emote or emoji or whatever it's called reaction. If my sound is okay, guys, thank you so much in advance. And for anyone tuning in after, this is for the live listeners. All right, thank you guys. Okay, that's two thumbs up, three thumbs up. All right, um, let's dive straight into it. I want you to, I see these talks as sort of meditative sessions, so like public meditative sessions. We want to take a line of thought or a line of thinking or a pattern of thinking and follow that through. We're going to talk about a few things today that I find um, valuable or invaluable. Primarily, what I find valuable right now is um, the idea of the importance of healing and the idea of the importance of campaigning for um, moral values and campaigning for gentleness and softness amidst a world that is becoming increasingly in- brutal. Right? Not only have humans chosen to go down a certain path where um, it is we have become very accustomed to you know, destroying one another and sort of like being in this role of observation while other humans, possibly who are like, you know, of lower consciousness, destroy each other. I think it's very important to both detach and then reattach yourself to the material world, but in within the correct context. Um, for the longest time, for the longest time, um, how we have been taught to view the world was to have an understanding of it as this great, large, big thing where we are but sort of like small specks within it, right? So this is why I, you know, like to bring up the symbology of David and Goliath, right? Where David slays Goliath and you know cuts off his head and displays it for um their opponents, the Philistines. And this causes the slaying of the giants, the slaying of the giants, if you look at that story, um, causes the Philistines to uh, tremble and fall back, right? And sort of like the understanding of that is like a small man, with but you know a few stones and a slingshot can um, impress great things onto life, right? And change the course and sort of like change the course of history. But the problem to me is this: with how history has unfolded and where we find ourselves in this very strange timeline. I, I think we live in a timeline where David never stopped killing, right? Um, where it's not the slaying of Goliath, but it is the extinction of it is the extinction of the whole race of giants, right? That type of thing. And I'll try to explain to you what I mean. Um, I never thought if you had asked me like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even 7 or 8 years ago, I never thought I would wake up in a world that has forgotten the lessons of history so much as it has. Um, and to me, that is heartbreaking, right? As someone who tries my best to work towards the general awakening of the human race. It's a very regressive practice to basically see um, the brutality that humans are still, even today, willing to inflict on one another. And the importance of this cannot be, right, um, overstated. Um, it is the single clearest, and most pragmatic, excuse, but you know, behind the idea of why are we not able to move forward into better living, into a better collective existence, right? Um, and yes, while there are machinations and trickery and deception and so on and so forth in place, um, these don't these come as temptations. They're only there to trigger that primal urge to slay and kill and dominate and so on and so forth. By design, these things are not even meant to incite this level of violence. The only thing that is inciting this level of violence is the hatred and the confusion and the the absolute complete utter disregard for spirituality and morality and just the general moral compass within the humans themselves that go out and commit great sins unto God, being great sins unto the other man. What is, you know, the greatest sin one can achieve in this life? Like, think about it in that sense. I know today is like more casual talk because of this, but I wanted to communicate this on a very basic level. So, for those who are on a spiritual path, like, I want you to know what kind of era you're entering. We're entering an era where things are more expensive than human lives. Getting like there are things that are becoming more valued or expensive than, like, let's say, a base, human's life. Um, because we have the illusion of abundance, because we live in sort of like these large societies, and we have constant reassurance that there are other people, there's like this infinite endless number of souls that we can interact with. We start to lose the value that is behind the individual. For example, where my family hails from, it's a very remote, mountainous village. Sometimes you would go 2 or 3 months without seeing a single person, right, on your trail or hunting trail or track or whatever. And it really felt like a blessing. You were in this cold and desolate and terrible world that's difficult to survive, and the companionship provided to you by a fellow human, it felt like a blessing. And it urged you to not seek conflict with these people, but it urged you to seek some sort of common ground or mutual respect, right? Now, because we have abundance in human life, it has, for those who are in lower consciousness, it has created this illusion of abundance where they'll say things like, "Oh, there's a lot of fish in the sea," that type of thing, right? Um, that's great, and we should be thankful that we get the opportunity to at will sort of like interface with as many people as we can nowadays, live in a big metropolis, and get to see all these new faces all the time. We should have gratitude for that. Um, and it also shouldn't, we shouldn't allow ourselves to forget that human life is very precious. It's very precious. And um, just because you're in a state of abundance, it shouldn't make you spoiled in a sense of like, oh, um, this and that. But if you go back to the brutality of the whole thing, right? Um, what we're willing to inflict onto one another for an experienced soul, let's say that for a very sensitive soul, um, seeing these things committed is it's not even heartbreaking in a sense of like, oh, that's terrible, and oh, and I empathize with their physical pain. Um, it is very disappointing in a sense of like, because on one side you have these things that are real, they're very real, and on the other hand you have the vision or the image of what could have been instead. The amount of energy like collective energy that goes into the destruction of one another, which is basically self-destruction, is very intense right now. And it will only become more and more intense as we're seeing, all these nations and, these worldwide movements, these geopolitical movements, that they think are subtly happening, but they're actually not, right? Um, some of us who understand geopolitics sort of like can see that, where the general direction we're headed is not a direction of peace and collective and mutual well-being and living and so on and so forth. It's very important to not forget the message of healing. It's very important to sort of like understand that all of this comes from the impurity that lives within the human heart, and impurity lives within a lot of human hearts nowadays, apparently. Um, are we reaping the quote unquote reward of how we've lived, or how our past generations have lived in the past? Yes, yes, we are. It's very important to sort of like be the dissonant voice right now, to be the dissonant voice among so many that are preaching division, right? Like divisiveness. And even though I disagree with a lot of the things some spiritual teachers might say, right? I like to have a little bit more teeth on me, get it? But it is universally important. It's not important on the material realm as much, right? But it's universally important on a spiritual level to not self-harm, right? And harming the others, spiritual in a spiritual sense, self-harm as well. Um, no matter how brutal the world gets, the moment you subscribe to the brutality of that world, I really need you to think about this, okay? I need you to like let go of your ego for a little bit when you're listening to this. I need you to let go of the attitude like, "Oh, I know this already. I know that you know this already." Okay? Um, this is not some secret, whatever hermetic knowledge or whatever that we usually talk about, and I try to share with you. But it's an important, valuable lesson. And when your ego is engaged, it's very difficult to really grasp the depth of the lesson. And the lesson is that you can't underestimate the power of healing, and you can't underestimate the power of agency, especially when it comes to living in a brutal world. You know, um, why I want to preach this basically is because I've seen the other end of it, right? Um, and those people who will swear by it today that they've seen the other end of whatever terrible things they're telling other people to do, to like conquer and kill and dominate and so on and so forth. They're liars. They're lying. They haven't seen the other end of it. I've, let's say, partly seen the other end of it through personal experiences coming from a place that has been relatively war torn, but also, um, like I've I've dreamt it in a sense, right? You understand, like, once you've seen a pattern, enough times, you understand where things are going and what the general attitude of most people is, where the attitude is about winning the game of life, right? But by winning the game of life, you're also sort of subscribing to the idea that, okay, I'm going to limit myself to this very low consciousness state of being, because you can't the game of life is becoming such a thing that you can't win it unless you display a certain quality of brutality and primal aggressive domineering expression, right? So now we're stuck between those two realities where there's material survival and physical survival, um and there's a spiritual path that seems like it seems like it gives you nothing or very little. We've given a lot of agency to a lot of people. Um, the way this world of ours is designed is given a lot of agency to a lot of people. Everyone feels like they're David and they're going out to slay Goliath. You understand? And David, in his own right, even in a biblical sense, let's say, so like he is the king come manifest, right? Um, he is the main character of the stories of others, so to speak, right? Um, but the problem is if everyone's David, right? There is no army to accompany him. There is no army to accompany him against the Philistine march. There is no Goliath. There is no sort of like mutually agreed upon evil primal force. There is no dark to the light. If everyone is the light, right? That's the shortest way we have to, like, if you teach everyone that, oh, you're absolutely perfect and you can do no wrong, and this is the sentiment behind how most children are raised today. Oh, you're perfect, you're the most important, think about you, me all the time. I get a lot of messages, right? And the general sentiment behind the messages is like, oh, can you tell me about my da 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 da? Can you tell me how to better? And I love that. I love self improvement. But sometimes I feel a note behind that favor, and the note behind that favor is tell me or try to teach me maybe or give me advice on how to dominate my space better, how to dominate the world. You have to understand, my friends, this was never about dominating your space. This was never about winning some trivial contest that you feel like you've been preparing for your whole life, because that's what society largely teaches us, that we're preparing for this big contest and really we're going to win this big contest and we're going to achieve everything we wanted to achieve in the material world, and then we'll fly into the sun, and maybe like the last 5 or 10 years of our lives we'll start to worry about our spiritual bodies and our spiritual fate and destiny. But that's not how life unfolds, right? And that is by design, and as it should be. You need to understand that your journey, this obsession with me, goes against your spiritual progress. It goes against the me. It's very important to understand that. Like, let's say when we learn physiognomy, right? We learn it because it deals with light and dark both. We learn a skill uh, that largely makes us judgmental, right? It makes us really good at judgment, and then we cast that judgment, we use that judgment to sort of like better our lives. But that's the facade, that's the illusion, that's the mirage, that's the branding strategy, that's the marketing campaign, right? When in truth, when you do have this skill, right? When you do have the ability, the vision, through constant use and regular use, you sort of understand, wait a second, there's a deeper lesson to this. I've been following a carrot on a stick all this time, and the deeper lesson of that is that now I can better see the sadness of others. Now I can better see the gentle kindness in others. Now I can better see what hurts them, what saddens them, what what difficulties or hardships they have to deal with. It's a way of luring you into sort of like the formulaic and the selfish, but then because of your increased intellect, your increased wisdom, now you can better view the world and the people for what it is. And when you get to a certain level in physiognomy, let's say, you understand a very, very saddening truth. And that saddening truth is that most people you interact with are largely broken, and they're hurting very deeply, and how they express the hurt. right, is through lashing out and through acts of violence and acts of aggression, or subscribing to different, violent ideas and so on and so forth. Like, for example, and this subscribing happens on a such a basic level as well. And I got a comment the other day, and I know I got that comment because I saw some other person, person said, they posted someone who they feel is an authority figure to them, or some sort of intellectual authority. They posted like, oh, like all of these physiognomy experts who don't show their own faces, oh, they're frauds and yada yada. And obviously, um, it's not a secret. Like, my persona, I don't mind people, knowing who I am or my face or whatever. There are people who have, like, you could go look it up if you really want to. Like, I'm a nobody on the internet, but um the problem I have with that is that that's not even a true statement, right? Like, um, the assumption that stands behind that statement is illogical, because the assumption behind the statement is that you get into physiognomy, for example, to judge other people and tell them like, oh, like, you have a pimple here, and you have a lack of testosterone and yada yada, whatever these people decided in their minds, because they're incompetent. Whatever they've decided that, the primary function of physiognomy is, that's what they feel like other people use it as, right? So they're like, well, show your own face, because what they mean is, if you're going to judge other people according to their physiognomies, then you show us your physiognomy. The problem was that with that is that I never got into physiognomy to judge other people and tell them, oh, you're like badly at this and good at that and blah blah blah. And I'm sure neither did you, right? So the understanding of that has to be, um, you're someone who has a sway, right? People look up to you, they listen to you. When you say something like that, that is relatively incompetent and sort of like distasteful, right, and largely untrue, you can see the damage that's been done, because I have people, who I have never interacted with, like, they'll sometimes comment this thing. It's happened a few times where, like, oh, you think you're some sort of like teacher or whatever, but you don't even show your face, and you do like, you're missing the point. Everyone's missing the point. It's not a game. It's not a contest. Not a game of like who dominates the other. um, the function of learning and the function of becoming better is to see more. That is the function, because when you see more, you get closer and closer to the image of God, right? You get closer to understanding, almost on an instinctive and intuitive level, of what this world is, right? And where your place in this world is, which is very difficult to figure out, especially in a time like this where you're bombarded with different information, right, all the time. The primary goal for those into spiritual advancement is always, I think, if you look at any religion or ideology or philosophical thought, or mythological, sort of like mythos, the primary goal is always the acceptance of the self, the acceptance of the other, and understanding that you live in a broken world that sort of like intuitively needs healing. So tell me this, how many people do you know around you, like, really think about this, that are actively engaging and trying to heal the world? And how many people around you do you know that are probably, inadvertently, but regardless of that, engaged in its eventual destruction, right? The the scales are the scales are off, my friends. And there are only a few people among 100, right? Among 100 people, maybe two or three, who are actively understanding what this world is. Because if you understand what this world is, then you make every effort you possibly can to heal it, right? Every effort you possibly can. It's very important to not forget that, especially when you're out there sort of like competing for jobs and careers and all this kind of stuff. um Everyone needs to live, and not everyone is has the quality or degree of belief to sort of like know that they are going to receive as much, let's say, like money or income or material wealth as they need. It's very difficult to be in that mind state, especially when society is at large is pushing you towards the idea of like you have to have more, you have to sort of like jump over your own head, you have to overachieve. Well, what are you overachieving? Like what resource are you expending to overachieve? The very idea of overachieving means you do something that is beyond your capacity, beyond your current capabilities, beyond what you should be able to currently do, right? So you're stepping into this sort of like willful suffering. You're stepping into this place of unhappiness in order to extract more material wealth from life than what you need, evidently, right? And then to extract more material wealth from life by taking it from others. You're always given the amount of energy that you require to do your best work. It's true. In this world, you are. And some people find that, some people get angry when I say that. And I'm not talking to them from a point of like, I'm not a millionaire, right? Um, I have just enough. And I've, let's say, you wonderful people or, someone else who are supporting me from time to time, supporting my work, buying my stuff. I see that as sort of like an exchange with the universe where, okay, I will be given as much as I need, right? And you have to find acceptance in that. You have to sort of like accept that, okay, like this is the exchange of energy that I'm doing with the universe right now. Um, the moment you try to go over your energy, you won't be able to, and I'm sure you've seen this pattern 1,000 times, but you couldn't like put your finger on it. You can't name what it is, but you've seen it 1,000 times. When someone goes beyond their energy exchange, beyond their threshold, beyond their capacity, the only way they can get rich is off of other people. Some people naturally, like, let's say, truly awakened souls who need the financial backbone to do more healing work or more good in the world, right? They will be given in honest ways, through honest pathways, let's call that, more financial resource. Yes, it's true. Some won't be because they don't need the financial resource to enact their acts of healing, right? But let's say most people now who are, financially, well off, right, who are also powerful, magicians in their own sort of like sense, um they're they're rich not off the backs of their own energetic exchange with the universe, so not equal exchange with the universe, right, but the inequity that is created from taking from the other. They're rich off of other people's energy and other people's back, right? That's a dirty secret, with material wealth and money, and it's also what creates conflict. Um, and it's also what enables conflict to even occur. Well, because there's conflict of interest, right? Um, when we talk about your place in this world and your place in your life, and even contemplating these ideas, just the fact that you are here, the fact that you're engaging with this content, um a lot of people see this as self-destructive because you're entering into a mind state, like, to them, from their perspective. If I'm someone who's very overly logical, pragmatic, and I'm looking from the outside in, what I'm seeing is a bunch of people who are losers. I'm seeing a bunch of people who are wasting their time where they could be making more money and dominating the world. Let's say, if we ask someone like, who's on the grind every day and never smells the flowers, that type of thing, right? Um, Someone who feels like wealth and money is the highest value that they can achieve in their lives, right? To them, all of us are probably collectively idiots. And I understand that too. I understand their outlook as well, but I also know that it's wrong, right? And that's why we're here. Um, yes, could we be spending this time going out and, making an extra buck? Can if I do, that for 50 minutes a day or 40 minutes a day can we eventually go and buy a better car for ourselves somewhere down the line? Yes, we can. Yes, you have the agency to do that, right? But there are more important. The truth of life, if you're on the spiritual path, is that there are much more important things than that. The world needs healing. It means you need healing. You need to upgrade yourself. You need to bring yourself out of the mud and muck and get yourself out of this state of personal aggrandizement a little bit. It's what I see like in people in this space, in these spiritual spaces. They're here for the wrong reasons, right? And it's a good way to trick them into real knowledge, right? Into real wisdom, into real light magic, right? But they're here for personal, not personal evolution, but personal sort of like, let's say, why is occult knowledge sought after, right? It's always to upgrade the individual, right? So it's always to be like, oh, I want more. I want to know this and that secret. I want to know how to like alchemize my emotions, my life. I want to. What does this serve? What does this pursuit of yours serve? Because if you truly wanted higher knowledge, that is the best way to not receive it, right? Is the best way to bar yourself from ever receiving it from the actual source. The only way you can receive it is if you buy an expensive book. I know people who pay $10,000 to buy and read banned books, and there's nothing in these books that you cannot attain on your own. Nothing. It's just like a formulaic way of achieving this knowledge that you haven't earned, and it's not even full knowledge in that sense because you're missing the context of the vision, of the perspective that is given to you. um Look at it like this, okay? Most of the things that you think um matter very little in comparison to how you affect this realm. Like, imagine yourself. I really want you to imagine this. Imagine yourself just for a minute with me, that you're in your body and you're wearing whatever you're wearing right now, and you're drifting off into the distance of space, into the cosmos, into the empty, vast void of the cosmos. Like, just imagine that. And you're drifting away, you're drifting off. And slowly, as this is happening, you find it more difficult, and this naturally occurs, you find it more difficult to tell the passage of time, right? Just imagine your body in that field. You're not uncomfortable or anything like that. You're just drifting in space. You're very comfortable. You find it more difficult to tell the passage of time because there's no noise around you. There's no passing cars. There's no talking people. There's no work to be late at. There's no alarm clock going off. There's no sun, rising, and peeking onto your window pane, right? There's no moon outside. There's no music. There's no nightclubs. Nothing. Like, it becomes more difficult to tell the passage of time. And then I want you to dissolve everything you're wearing. I want you to dissolve your clothes, right? Um, they don't, brush against your skin anymore, right? They don't get more dirty. They don't dissolve. They don't decay, right? It's more difficult to feel the passage of time. And then you can imagine, like, you're looking at distant planets and their movements, and they're moving very slowly and weighted and heavily, right? They're moving across these vast distances, and it's almost like entrancing and meditative just to watch these giant blobs of mass and gas and light move in this monotony, in this slow, macabre dance of endless repetitions, right? and they become your clock. They become your clock. It's like the when you view these planets, they become the clock. They become the thing through which the passage of time is made known to you. And then I want you to understand that I want you to imagine you flow into the deepest, darkest corners of the cosmos. I want you to there are no more planets here. They're just twinkling stars in the vast distance. And sometimes when you look at the night sky, one of these stars will fall, they will disappear, right? Their light will stop to shine. And that is how that becomes the clock. That becomes your way of understanding the passage of time. And when one of these things happens, when you're in this entranced meditative state deep within the cosmic womb, right? Sometimes a star will disappear from the horizon, and that's how you will know a millennia has passed. Probably a millennia has passed. That's your only gauge of the passage of time. And you have to look at your own body at this state, and you have to look at the decaying of your own flesh, right? You can look at the wrinkles forming on your body. Your body becomes the clock. Your body becomes the means through which you understand the passage of time. Because what signifies the passage of time is the decay of matter, is the shifting of matter. You can look at your face, it's drooping down, it's becoming different. You can look at your bones, right? You can look and understand the decay of your bone mass. Um, and you can see that as a symbolic act that communicates to you the passage of time and linearity. And then you can imagine yourself, you can visualize yourself dying, and you can envision yourself, you're losing the body, you're losing your tool, you're losing the clock, and all there's left of you is your astral presence, let's say your spiritual body, right, the harmonizing with the rest of the nothingness and the emptiness around it. And the only thing here that signifies the passage of time is not something you hear, it's not something you can touch, it's not something that was there before and is not again, right? When you're in this void of emptiness and you've lost your sensory elements, right? You can't hear anything, you can't see anything, you can't feel the touch of anything, right? So the sensory perception of time completely fades away. And the only thing that remains of you to sort of like enact the passage of time, to impress that onto your own thoughts and onto your own minds, is your own thoughts. If I start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe I can go on infinitely and keep counting to sort of like not lose track of time. But you have to understand that time loses its meaning and its function when it's not accompanied by decay. Therefore, it stops to exist. When a thing loses its function, it stops to exist. And only then you realize, once you've sort of like abandoned these sensory elements, these elements that seem so pervasive and so strong and so important and so on and so forth, in where you are now. Once you've abandoned these elements, you understand that what you're left with deep down in your psyche, in your mind, is the only part of you that is immortal, the only part of you that is infinite. So by not subscribing to the illusion, by departing from the illusion, you sort of start to understand that what lies beyond the illusion is an eternity with yourself, where time is no longer a measuring point or a point of measurement, where you're incapable of measuring it. I really want you to get yourself in that mind state. I really want you to sort of like embrace the thought of that. And I want you to ask yourself the question, what does an eternity with myself look like? Because that is the dilemma, that is the prerequisite dilemma that our spirits and our soul faces and is forced to face when we finish this our linear time-based life, when we ascend to the next stage, which is the stage and the state of being bodiless and senseless. And this is why the greatest self-critic and the Anubis god that guards the realms beyond that lie beyond this realm is you. This is why the idea of heaven and hell is so pervasive, because both heaven and hell are very personal, private, intimate experiences. Um, and the general implication of this removal of the senses is that you are in everything you touch, and everything you touch is also you. But can you be fine with how you've touched it? Can you be on good terms with how you touched these things? And most souls after their incarnations are not. And that is why we keep coming back into a state of matter, why we keep falling back into a state of matter to attempt again to heal the world and to heal ourselves. But the price of coming back into a state of matter is the river Lethe, is the the is the river of forgetfulness. It's sort of like a memory leakage in space time, right? Because the experiment, the idea of everything would lose its meaning if you already knew what you know now, right? So you come back from a fresh slate and you try to rediscover yourself and you try to understand the meaning of healing and why it is important to both, heal yourself and then attempt um, to heal the world. If you can allow yourself to go beyond the competitive nature of this realm, if you can allow yourself to not be disgusted by or hate the terrible things that we willingly do to each other as human beings, if you're willing to extract a certain wisdom from that, from the horrors of living, so to speak, maybe, just maybe, you're equipped to make this world slightly better in your efforts to do so, in your humble efforts to do so. When we talk about New Earth, and when we talk about the destiny of Earth, that destiny has already been decided. It is a logical, eventual end point for what this world might become. But the problem is, it will take a lot of iterations for it to become that, especially when in the timeline where we find ourselves, where we live in a timeline that's very dark. Um, this is gonna be a longer conversation today, but I'm feeling like it. I want to share a lot of these sentiments with you guys because sometimes I feel that I'm a little bit misunderstood. Um, when I talk about the deceptive nature of this world and the brutal nature of this world and so on and so forth. Um, I want everyone to understand that healing has always been my prime directive. Sometimes healing takes theatrics, though. For those of us who are not yet too evolved, let's say on a spiritual level, to heal through means of thought, right? I wish I could think myself into a better state, right? I wish I could think myself into a healed state. I wish I could think myself into a state where I don't have post traumatic, stress or depression. I wish I could have the mental fortitude to achieve those instantaneous changes that alter my very being, right? Like, let's say on a quantum level. But for those of us who still need the theatrics of life and matter, um, it's good for us to go through these dark passages, these darker passages in life, where sometimes you play a little theater with yourself. Oh, I'm surviving this brutal world, and therefore I'm, you know, forced to make this and this and this concession and that concession, and so on and so forth. You're forced to compromise with your own higher morals and your own higher spirituality to, survive this dark and terrible world, which in fact is not that dark and terrible at all. It's us who makes it dark and terrible, right? Um, and some people feel like that's hypocritical of me when I say it sometimes, and I understand why, because they have a limited understanding of what I'm trying to convey, I guess, because what I'm trying to convey is a very complex thing. It's a very paradoxical thing where I will tell you, never forget you live in a world of weakness, you live in a dangerous place, never forget that. But then, almost in the same breath, I will tell them, you know tolerance and forgiveness are the way to go, and healing is like the most important thing. Personal healing and collective healing is the most important thing. You can only pass on to the next stage of whatever this incredibly blissful existence we have, as the Egyptians said it. If your heart is as light as a feather, what does that mean? What does it mean when you have a weighted, heavy heart? Right? Go back to the allegory I just gave you about losing your flesh, losing your body, drifting into the space, drifting into the dark void of the cosmos, where your sensory perception no longer exists, and you can no longer perceive or have the instruments or the tools to perceive the passage of life. What is left of you is an eternity with yourself, eternity with your own thoughts. And there are many realizations that dawn on you when you're left in this space. And for some people, it's terrifying. Some people, it's scary. For some people, it's blissful. Um, and the passage happens then and there. Once you've judged yourself, no one else is coming to judge you. No monster is coming to eat your heart, right? No wrathful angel or devil or God is coming to enact its wrath or judgment upon you. No one is coming to judge you. Only your greatest critic is coming to judge you, which is yourself. Because an eternity with ourselves is basically, um, you're unable to run from the truths of your life and the truths of your being. And whatever you've uncovered about yourself in this life, you lose a lot of things, right? You depart from a lot of truths, in a sense of you lose all of these things that you think you were, right? But at the same time, you gain these new, understandings of what is in your nature. You can't lie to yourself any longer, right? When we talk about conflict and when we talk about healing and how to engage in that healing, the first thing is the acceptance of how the world is and what the world is, and not giving it too much weight. We think a little bit too much about how other people are and what they're doing, and you know how they're affecting things. And I'm guilty of this as well. I'm very guilty of this. Um, you might do it for the reason I do it, for research purposes, let's say, right? I want to study human behavior to better understand other people and myself, right? But at some point, even this has to be abandoned, right? I always say, like, the most the most highly awakened souls and who live in this world are very average. They live in average income households. They live seemingly, like if you look at it from a side, very average lives. They're very spiritually advanced. If you know how to read energy, you will immediately like notice them, right? They're very spiritually advanced. Some people who are in who live a life of like monkhood, you know, could not sort of like imagine the spiritual depths to which these people go. So you might ask like, oh, well, why are they not out there and teaching the world about these vision dreams that they have and these spiritual truths? Because you lose all the desire to do so. Because you gain a profound understanding that the world, with how it is right now, is just a mirror. It is it is the only way it can be. There's no other way reality can unfold. Now we can theory craft, so to speak, right? We could theorize, well, if we had done this and that, if we had been better, so on and so forth, things would have been different. Most likely they would have, but they're not. And because they're not, remember that we live in an input output type of world. Things are always the way they're supposed to be. That's the only way they can be. Because the world at large, anything that extends beyond your body and your aura, right, is a direct reflection cast onto the material world of what the collective mind, of what the human collective spirit requires for it to heal its traumas. Most traumas are healed very painfully, as we see today, through conflict and brutal voyages and years and centuries and decades and ages of devastation and human violence. This is what most lower caste souls require. They have to play out this grand theater of life to heal their wounds and misfortunes. So, sort of to put an emphasis on all that is very important. You know what, you guys, I'll do something that I haven't done these spaces. If anyone has like a question or a thought or whatever, um, feel free to come on, like share your thoughts or whatever. I don't know why I'm just feeling it today. Um, so I don't know, like press the little button if you want to get on, just in case, and I'll put you in as a speaker or something like that. I'm not sure how that works, but I think if you like press the button, it'll like notify me or something. Um, would be nice. I'm gonna make these a little bit more interactive over time. Um, but generally, the general idea of today's talk, of today's meditation, is don't get caught up too much in what is about to unfold, because what's about to unfold is very physical, it's very material, like it's very out there. It's very raw. There's a lot of like pain and suffering and so on and so forth. We have to remain steadfast in the face of all of this. Um, Steadfast on a spirit in a spiritual sense, where we're both sort of like understanding and accepting of what's going on, but also not like settling. I don't like when people settle. Like even spiritual teachers and stuff like that. I hated, like when I was younger. I hated being told that, because I could sense like intuitively that there was something off there. There was something wrong with that statement. Where um doing nothing is being nothing. I genuinely believe that. So, in the face of injustice and in the face of untruth and things like that, again, remember what we said about touching things and how incredibly important and a healing experience it could be to touch the right things at the right time, to say the right words at the right time, to incant the correct sort of like word spells in the right moment, to share the correct thought forms with the right people, to be in the same space and in a particularly if eventful time, um, with specific other minds to share information with. Everything is connected. If if you and I know one another, even on a basic level, let's say if we've talked or spoken, just a few times before or anything like that, we are incredibly interconnected, far more than you could imagine, far more than you could imagine. We are interconnected in very intimate ways. Um, and this link, right, is not by accident. This link is a symptom, a result of all of our past decisions. So if you're reaping any rewards or any information or any companionship, like we said, if you're reaping any companionship, um, that should make that should give you an immense feeling of gratitude because your decisions have led you to, this point. And again, very important not to antagonize the material realm. This is a classroom. Some people are learning their lessons. It's fine. Can we make it a better classroom on our little micro or like meso levels? We can. We can. We can make it a more beautiful experience for others and help them connect with their higher selves, with with the creator at large, through redirecting and diverting their attention towards beautiful things through the creation of beautiful things, through the creation of a beautiful family or beautiful art or well-spoken word, right? Through knowledge and wisdom and helping them attain the intellectual prerequisites that are required for spiritual advancement. None of this material world is bad or evil in that sense. Um, Same thing for enjoying or partaking in, let's say, the pleasures of the flesh, right? Again, something else that I really disliked when when spiritualists, talk about the physical realm as like almost like they're antagonizing it. How are you antagonizing something that, when uh, the meaningfulness of that thing is to be able to integrate it within within your psyche, to accept it, right? If you antagonize something, then how are you able to accept it? You're unable to accept it. So all you get really is like this, I call it a fashion statement. Though I'll wear a robe and shave my head, and for some reason that makes me more spiritually apt. But um, it's not true. Like we said, the most awakened spirits, the most enlightened spirits live everyday normal lives. They're not people who live on mountains. They're not people to who pray to, divinity, every day on, like, I don't know, like three times or four times a day. No, they're not. They're the people who are best able to accept both the spiritual realm and the material realm. Um, they're the people who can find a balance between these two things. And even while living in a state of imbalance, not forget the primary meanings, right? And the primary sort of like spiritual depths of life. It's very difficult to live according to your morals or your spiritual, how to say, purpose. It's very easy to talk about it, but it's very, very, very difficult to live by it. If all of us did that, we'd live in a far more wonderful world. All right, we can think on that. Enough for this today. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We're gonna do a little bit on physiognomy the next time, I believe. I think it's I think it's time we're gonna talk a little bit about physiognomy, more like formulaic practical stuff next time. Um, Yeah, healing. You know what I mean? Healing. Like, there's nothing more important. You might think there are more important things, but there's nothing more important. All right. Talk to you all soon. Bye bye.